Okay, good day, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you are watching this. Welcome to another Build Hub session. And today, like seen on the screen, we'll be going over three things: if else statements, functions, and classes, of course, all in Python. Okay, so firstly, let's kick off with if else statements. So, what are if else statements? If else statements are simply statements that are used to check for conditions in Python, right? So, if we are trying to check for separate conditions, or we're trying to write a program that checks for conditions based on maybe user input or something else, I wouldn't know your use case, but basically if statements are used to check for conditions. So let's look at a scenario where we use if statements and the syntax accompanying it. So let's say we had in a variable called number is equal to 5, and let's say we wanted to do something, or rather we declared this earlier in the program and we still want to check if the number variable is still assigned to 5, or if 5 is still assigned to the number variable. How would we check that? We'll check that using an if statement. So we can say if this is the if keyword. So this is a keyword in Python, keep that in mind, and this is what precedes all if statements. So the general syntax, or rather the general formula of an if statement is if condition then block of code. So simply put, if this condition evaluates to true, the block of code under it is being performed. It's as simple as that. Of course, it has to be indented because that's what tells the Python interpreter that that block of code belongs to that if statement. So let's say we want to check if it's still 5. If number is equal to 5, then colon, then let's say we want to do something, then we can print this number is 5. So basically we have written a very simple if statement. So it checks if this number is 5 or is equal to the value 5, and then prints this number is 5 if it is. But if it isn't, well, this wouldn't be true, this would just be false, and then the code under it will not be run because this is false. And since there's no other code to handle that, nothing will happen. So let's look at it. Exactly, we outputted this number as 5. So that simply means it checked if this number is equal to 5, and it actually was, because that's what we defined it as, and then printed this number is 5 because it's actually 5. It passed the test. But what if we wanted to do something if the number wasn't 5 anymore? How would we handle that? We would simply handle that using an else statement. So if statements check for one clause, right? It checks for a single clause if this number is equal to 5. But an else statement checks for any other clause that isn't this clause. What does that mean? That simply means if this doesn't evaluate to true, no matter what it is, if it doesn't evaluate to true, if it is anything apart from 5, the else clause will be run. So that simply means the code indented under the else clause is what will run instead. So let's say we wanted to say, since if it's not 5, can say this number is not 5. So if this number was, let's say, 6, since this evaluates to false now that the number is 6, and the number is nothing, it's not 5, it's not what is given in this if clause. Whatever it is that is not equal to this if clause, or if this if clause does not evaluate to true, anything else, no matter what you put, would go under this else clause, because it's like saying if this is true, do this, but anything else, I don't really care about what it is. It could be true, it could be false, it could be a list. If it is not this, print this number is not 5. So it's a bit general in a sense. So let's run this. Exactly, it prints this number is not 5. Now this is, like I said, far too general. It's a bit too general. So what if we wanted to handle other cases, right? What if we wanted to handle when the number is 6 per se? This simply means, this simply shows us, or I'm trying to illustrate the fact that we can have multiple if statements to check for multiple conditions. You don't have to only check for one condition. So if we wanted to check, do something if the number was 6, we could just add another if statement and say if number is equal to 6, then we can say print this number is not 6. It's as simple as that. So now that this number is 6, right? Since this is not true, it goes to the next if statement and then evaluates it. Since this is true, we would have this number is 6. Is not rather this number this is supposed to be this number is 6 rather. My bad. We're supposed to have this number is 6 exactly. So that is what we have. So this works serially. This works one after another. So it checks the first if statement. If this is false, then it goes to the next if statement. If this is false, if both conditions or if all the conditions above the else statement evaluates to false, then and only then is the else statement run, because it doesn't pass any of the aforementioned conditions, and then the else statement is run. It's as simple as that. Now we also have something else that's similar to an if statement, but we have a different use case for that. We call it an elif statement. An elif statement simply means else if, right? It simply means else if. It's just a short form of else if, but you do not write else if, you write elif. Now else if works similarly or similar to an if statement. It still just takes a condition and then does something indented under it. But what's the difference between an if and an elif statement? Well, we use an multiple if statements, right? If both conditions can occur at the same time. We use it if both conditions can occur at the same time. Therefore, they are not mutually exclusive. Of course, we can't have the number 6 here. We can't have the number 6 and the number 5 at the same time. So this is bad code actually. We should have been using an elif statement. Well, because the number 6 and the number 5 cannot occur at the same time. We can't have a number being 6 and 5 at the same time. It doesn't make sense. These are two distinct integers. So here we are supposed to use an elif statement because they cannot occur at the same time. But if they could occur at the same time, right? If they could occur at the same time, we would use multiple if statements. That means if they are not mutually exclusive. Rather, yeah, if they are not mutually exclusive, if they could occur at the same time, you would use multiple if statements. But if they are mutually exclusive, meaning they cannot occur at the same time, you use an if statement and an elif statement. So I'll give you an example of that. But just to show you that it still works the same way, it still gives you this number is 6. It's just another conditional test. But the trick is knowing when to use it, as it's better for writing clean code. So what is an example that the two conditions could occur at the same time? Let's say we had the same number, right? But we wanted to check if a number is even or greater than 5. So what would we use here? Would we use an multiple if statement, or just use an if and an elif statement? Well, let's think critically. Can these two conditions occur at the same time? Well, if we look through the numbers, we have 1, it's not even and it's not greater than 9. 2, it's even but it's not greater than 5. It's even but it's not greater than 5. 3, it's odd, it's not even and it's not greater than 5. 4, it's even and it's not greater than 5. 5, it's not even and it's not greater than 5. But if we look at 6 is an even number, right? 6 is divisible by 2, and 6 is actually greater than 5. So here we have use cases. We have cases where both conditions can occur at the same time. And in short, any even number above 5, right, satisfies both these conditions. So since we have a case where these conditions can be satisfied at the same time, since we have a case that shows they are not mutually exclusive, what do we use here? We use multiple if statements. So we can say if number, just to write this in code, this is just pseudocode. Let's write this in real code. So if number, how do we check if it's an even number? We simply just use the what do they call this, modulus function? Yeah, the modulus function that gives the remainder. So we can say if the number modulus 2 is equal to, because this gives you the remainder, is equal to 0. Because if you have an even number, right, when you divide that number by 2, the remainder should be 0. So this is just what it's checking. Then we can print this is an even number, right? And then we also have another condition where if the number is greater than 5, print this number is greater than 5. then anything else. So how would we implement that? We'll just use an elif statement. So anything else, or rather an else statement. So anything else we have print not, right? Anything. So what do we put in an else statement? Our else statement simply means none of these conditions are satisfied. So we can print this number is not greater than 5 or an even number. Okay, so we're done with our code. So we can delete this and let's just use the same variable. So once we run this, what do we have? Beautiful. We have this is an even number, which is correct. 6 is an even number. And we have this number is greater than 5, which is also correct because 6 is greater than 5. So that's basically just a use case on when to use multiple if statements, how if statements work, when to use if elif statements, and how else works. So you could also use the if statement within loops, right? So if you remember, we went over for loops and while loops. So if you don't remember, you can just go through our videos. It's in the same playlist. So let's say we have the for loop for I in range 2 comma, let's use 2 comma 7, right? So let's say we wanted this loop to stop at a specific point in time. Let's say we didn't want to print the number 5. We wanted to print everything but the number 5. So we can say, you can use an if statement. If I equal to 5, right? We didn't want it to print the number 5. If I equal to 5, then we can do something. We do want this loop to do it. So what do we use in ignoring a value? We don't want to print it. What do we use in ignoring it? We use a pass statement. So a pass statement, or rather the pass keyword, is what you use to tell Python, hey, if this condition is met, do absolutely nothing. Pass. You will just ignore it and move on. Then we can now say else. Then we can print the number. We can print I. So let's run this and see how this would work. Let's just delete this for now. Let's run this and see how this will work. Beautiful. So since the range starts from 2 to 7, it would be 2 to 6 because it's 1 minus the last argument you provide. So this would be 2, 3, 4, and if you notice, it skipped 5 because we told it to pass if it's equal to 5. And then since it passed when it's equal to 5, everything else that was not equal to 5 got printed, which is 2, 3, 4, 6. Equally, if you wanted the loop to stop completely when a certain value is reached, if we don't want it to proceed from them, we can just use what we call a break statement. So a break statement is used to escape from a loop. If you don't want it to do something when it hits a value, if you don't want the loop to continue when it hits a value, let's say you have gotten what you wanted, you just break. So this would work by, it would print everything up until 4. Then once it finds that I is equal to 5, it breaks, it escapes the loop. It's as simple as that. So that's just a basic overview of if-else statements, if statements, conditionals, and you know how you can integrate them with loops. Again, if you don't know anything about loops, just watch our previous videos in this playlist.